The house felt different at 3 in the morning. Not haunted different, just hollow, like someone had sucked all the warmth out of our 10-year marriage and left behind this sterile shell where two strangers pretended to share a life. I couldn't sleep again. Lauren lay beside me, breathing that steady rhythm that meant she was genuinely out, not faking it like she'd been doing for months. Her phone buzzed once on the nightstand, then went silent. "Work emergency," she'd say if I asked. Always work these days. I slipped out of bed and padded to the laundry basket. Might as well be productive with my insomnia. Lauren's blouses needed hanging. The expensive ones she wore to impress her colleagues at the tech startup where she had been putting in those mysterious late hours. That's when I knocked over her perfume bottle. The crystal container rolled across her nightstand, and I lunged to catch it before it hit the hardwood floor. My hand swept behind the stand, and my fingers found something unexpected. A small key taped to the back panel where no one would ever think to look. I stared at that key for a long moment, my mind making connections I didn't want to make. Lauren's drawer, the one she always kept locked, the one she claimed held old college papers and sentimental junk, whenever I asked about it. My hands moved without conscious thought. The key slid into the lock like it belonged there, which I guess it did. The drawer opened with a soft whisper. Inside, underneath a silk scarf that smelled like her favorite perfume, I found them. The photograph hit me first. A Polaroid, slightly faded but recent enough that Lauren looked exactly like she did now. She was wrapped in the arms of Cameron Lindsay, her ex from college, the one she'd supposedly lost touch with years ago. They were both smiling, that intimate smile couples share when they think no one's watching. But it was the handwriting on the back that made my chest tighten. "Can't wait for next week. Love you always, L." The ink was fresh, the paper crisp. Beneath the photo, a stack of folded notes in Lauren's careful script. I opened the first one with trembling fingers. "Cameron, last night was incredible. I keep thinking about your hands, the way you whispered my name. Nick suspects nothing. Same time Thursday? The Riverside Hotel, room 237. Forever yours, Lauren." The date at the top was from 2 weeks ago. I read 3 more notes before my vision started swimming. Each one more explicit than the last, each one dated within the past month. Plans, promises, intimate details that made 15 years of marriage feel like a joke someone had been playing on me. At the bottom of the stack, I found something that made everything crystal clear, an envelope addressed to Cameron Lindsay with our home address printed in the return corner. Our address. She'd been using our house as a mail drop for their affair. I photographed everything with my phone, every note, every detail, the address on that envelope. Then I carefully returned everything to its place and locked the drawer, but I kept that envelope. Back in the kitchen, I made coffee and sat at the table where Lauren and I had shared 10,000 meals, planning a marriage that apparently meant nothing to her. The envelope sat in front of me like evidence in a trial I hadn't known I was part of. Cameron Lindsay. I remembered him now. Tall, smug, the kind of guy who wore expensive suits and talked about his investment portfolio at parties. He'd married some woman named Savannah about 5 years ago. I'd seen the announcement on social media. Savannah Lindsay. She deserved to know what her husband was doing with my wife. I walked to my home office and fired up the computer. A quick search gave me everything I needed. Cameron's current address, his wife's name, even her work information. Social media made stalking so convenient these days. I made copies of everything. The photograph, the notes, even a printout of the hotel receipt I found tucked behind the love letters. Then I slipped them into a manila envelope along with a single sheet of paper containing one line. "This is where they meet." I added our address below that, just to make sure she understood exactly where her husband was conducting his business. The post office opened at 8. I was there at 8:05, mailing the package with delivery confirmation. The tracking number felt like a loaded weapon in my pocket. Lauren was still sleeping when I got home. She looked peaceful, innocent even, with her hair spread across the pillow and that slight smile she wore in her dreams. I wondered if she was dreaming about Cameron. "Morning, honey," she said when she finally woke up, stretching like a cat. "You're up early." "Couldn't sleep," I said, which was true enough. "Coffee's ready." She padded to the kitchen in her silk robe, the one Cameron had probably peeled off her body in that hotel room. I watched her pour coffee into her favorite mug, the one I'd given her for our anniversary last year, and felt something cold settle in my chest. "I might be late again tonight," she said, not meeting my eyes. "Big presentation tomorrow." "Of course," I said. "Work comes first." She kissed my cheek before leaving, and I smelled her perfume, the same scent that had been all over those love notes. After her car disappeared down our street, I checked the tracking information. Package delivered, signature confirmed. Now I just had to wait. The waiting was the hardest part. For 3 days, I went through the motions of normal life while checking my phone obsessively for delivery updates. Lauren continued her charade, coming home late with stories about client meetings and strategy sessions that I now knew were covers for hotel room rendezvous. On Wednesday evening, she announced another late night. "Don't wait up," she said, grabbing her overnight bag, the one she claimed was for emergency work clothes, but probably contained lingerie Cameron would never see on me. "I'll probably be asleep," I replied, though we both knew I'd be awake, staring at the ceiling and imagining what they were doing. Thursday morning brought rain and an unusual quiet to our neighborhood. Lauren had already left for work, or for Cameron. I couldn't tell the difference anymore, when the doorbell rang at exactly 10:15. I was in the kitchen, pretending to read the newspaper while actually watching the street through our front window. A silver Honda Civic had pulled into our driveway, and a woman I didn't recognize sat behind the wheel for several minutes before finally getting out. She was tall, athletic, with short brown hair, and the kind of purposeful stride that suggested she was used to getting answers. A manila folder was clutched against her chest like armor. The doorbell rang again, more insistent this time. I stayed in the kitchen, listening. Lauren's car had pulled in 5 minutes earlier. Perfect timing, though she didn't know it yet. I heard her heels clicking across our hardwood floor. Heard her call out, "Coming?" The front door opened. "Can I help you?" Lauren's voice carried that polite confusion people use with unexpected visitors. "Are you Lauren Harrow?" The stranger's voice was steady, controlled, but I caught the edge underneath. "Yes, Lauren's response cut off abruptly. That's when the screaming started. "You piece of garbage!" The stranger's voice rose to a shriek that probably woke half the neighborhood. "You think you can destroy my marriage and I wouldn't find out? I don't know what you're talking about." Lauren's voice pitched higher, defensive. "Who are you?" "I'm Savannah Lindsay, Cameron's wife, the wife you've been writing love letters to my husband behind." I poured myself another cup of coffee and settled in to listen. Through the kitchen doorway, I could see them in our entryway. Lauren backed against the wall, Savannah advancing with that folder held out like a weapon. "These are your words, aren't they?" Savannah's voice carried clearly. "Your handwriting? Your promises to meet my husband in hotel rooms? I can explain." "Explain what?" "How you signed them 'Forever Yours, Lauren'. How you used your own address as a return label. How you detailed exactly what you wanted to do to my husband." The screaming intensified. Lauren's voice became shrill, desperate. "It's not what you think. We're just friends." "Friends?" Savannah's laugh was sharp enough to cut glass. "Friends don't write about how incredible it feels when your husband whispers their name. Friends don't plan secret hotel meetings." I glanced out the window. Mrs. Henley from across the street was standing in her garden, pruning shears forgotten in her hand as she stared at our house. 2 more neighbors had appeared on their porches, drawn by the commotion. "Please," Lauren was saying, "you don't understand." "Oh, I understand perfectly." Savannah's voice dropped to something more dangerous than shouting. "I understand that you're a marriage-wrecking snake who thought she was clever enough not to get caught." That's when Savannah opened her folder. "But here's what you didn't know," she continued, her voice carrying clearly to where I sat. "I've been tracking Cameron's lies for months. I have hotel receipts, credit card statements, text message records, photos of him entering that hotel on the exact dates you mentioned in your little love notes." The silence stretched for several seconds. "You want to see what your affair partner has been telling me?" Savannah's voice was almost conversational now. "He's been saying you've been stalking him, that you won't leave him alone, that you've been threatening to tell his wife lies about an affair that never happened." "That's not true," Lauren's voice cracked. "Really? Because I also have recordings of our phone conversations where he claims you've been harassing him for months. Funny how his story doesn't match your love letters, isn't it?" I could hear Lauren crying now, those ugly sobs that meant she knew she was trapped. "Here's what's going to happen," Savannah continued. "You're going to stop contacting my husband, you're going to stay away from him, from me, from our family, and if I hear even a whisper that you're still trying to destroy my marriage, these photos and letters are going to your boss, your friends, your family, and anyone else who needs to know what kind of person you really are. You can't... Watch me." Savannah's heels clicked across our floor. "Oh, and Lauren, next time you decide to wreck someone's marriage, maybe don't use your own address on the evidence. Makes it really easy for the wife to find you." The front door slammed hard enough to rattle our windows. I sat in the kitchen, sipping my coffee, listening to Lauren's sob in our entryway. Outside, Savannah's Honda backed out of our driveway and disappeared down the street, leaving behind a neighborhood full of witnesses and a wife whose secret life had just exploded in the most public way possible. After a few minutes, Lauren appeared in the kitchen doorway. Her face was blotchy, her makeup ruined, her perfect morning routine destroyed. "Nick," she said, her voice small and broken, "I can explain everything." I looked up from my newspaper, meeting her eyes for the first time in months. "Can you?" I asked. "Because I'm really curious to hear how you explain this one." Lauren stood in our kitchen doorway like a defendant waiting for a verdict. Her mascara had created dark tracks down her cheeks, and her hands shook as she tried to smooth her hair back into place. "It's not what it looked like," she began, but her voice carried no conviction. I folded my newspaper and set it aside. "What did it look like, Lauren?" "That woman, Savannah. She's crazy. She's been harassing Cameron for months, making up stories about us. We're just friends, Nick. We've been friends since college. Friends." I let the word hang in the air between us. "Friends who meet in hotel rooms." Her face went pale. How did I what? Know about the Riverside Hotel? Room 237? The Thursday meetings?" I watched her expression crumble with each detail. "Or maybe you're wondering how I know about the love notes you've been writing. The ones where you detailed exactly what Cameron whispers in your ear?" Lauren sank into the chair across from me, her legs apparently unable to support her anymore. "You've been spying on me." "I've been living with a stranger who happens to share my last name." I leaned back in my chair, studying her like she was a puzzle I was finally solving. "Tell me, when did you decide our marriage was worth throwing away for your college boyfriend?" "It's not like that." Her voice was barely above a whisper. "Cameron and we reconnected at that conference last year. It was innocent at first, just catching up, reminiscing about old times. And then?" She looked out the window, avoiding my eyes. "He was having problems with Savannah. She's controlling, jealous." He felt trapped. "So you decided to help him feel less trapped?" "We didn't plan for it to happen." Now she was looking at me, her eyes pleading for understanding I wasn't prepared to give. "But we have this connection, this history, something you and I lost years ago." "Something we lost," I repeated her words slowly. "When exactly did we lose it, Lauren? Before or after you started planning hotel meetings with another man?" She flinched. "You don't understand what it's like, being married to someone who doesn't really see you anymore. When was the last time you looked at me the way Cameron does? When was the last time you made me feel beautiful, desired? When was the last time you gave me the chance?" The question came out sharper than I'd intended. "You've been working late every night for months, Lauren. You barely speak to me when you're home. You flinch when I touch you. I thought you were stressed about work." "I was protecting you," she said, which might have been the most ridiculous thing she'd said yet. "Protecting me from what? The truth? Your affair? The fact that you've been using our home address to coordinate your meetings with another woman's husband?" Her mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. "How do you know all this?" I stood up and walked to the coffee maker, taking my time pouring a fresh cup. "Let me ask you something, Lauren. When you were writing those love notes to Cameron, when you were planning your secret meetings, when you were lying to my face every single day, did you ever think about what would happen when I found out?" "I thought—" She stopped, swallowed hard. "I thought maybe you already knew and just didn't care anymore." "Didn't care?" I turned to face her. "You thought I didn't care that my wife was having an affair." "We've been like roommates for years, Nick. Polite strangers sharing a house. When was the last time we had a real conversation? When was the last time you seemed interested in my life, my dreams, my feelings?" "Your feelings." I sat back down, studying her tear-stained face. "Tell me about your feelings, Lauren. Tell me how it felt to write love letters to another woman's husband. Tell me how it felt to lie to me every single day for months." She was crying again, but quietly now. "I never meant for it to go this far." "How far did you mean for it to go?" "I don't know." She wiped her nose with the back of her hand. "I just knew that being with Cameron made me feel alive again, like the person I used to be before I became just... This? This? Your wife. The woman who does your laundry and makes your dinner and pretends to be happy with a life that feels like it's suffocating me." The words hit harder than I'd expected. Not because they hurt, but because they revealed something I'd been trying not to see for months. Lauren hadn't just betrayed our marriage, she'd been planning her escape from it. "So what happens now?" I asked. She looked up hopefully. "Now we try to fix this. We go to counseling. We remember why we fell in love in the first place. We save our marriage." I stared at her for a long moment. This woman I'd shared 15 years with, who just spent the morning being publicly humiliated by another man's wife for an affair she was still trying to minimize. "Lauren," I said finally, "our marriage ended the moment you decided Cameron Lindsay was more important than the vows you made to me. Everything since then has just been paperwork. Her face crumpled. Please don't say that. Please. I'll end it with Cameron. I'll quit my job if I have to. We can move somewhere new, start over. Start over. I nodded slowly. That's exactly what I plan to do. I stood up and headed toward the door. Where are you going? She called after me. To think, I said, about what starting over actually looks like. What it looked like, I was beginning to realize, was making sure Lauren understood exactly what she'd thrown away, and making sure everyone else understood it too. The neighborhood had been buzzing since Savannah's visit. I could see Mrs. Henley still working in her garden, glancing toward our house every few minutes. 2 doors down, Jim Patterson was washing his car with unusual attention to detail, clearly hoping for more drama. They wanted a show? I was just getting started. The Rusted Nail wasn't the kind of bar where people went to be seen. It was the kind of place where contractors grabbed beer after work, where divorce papers got signed over whiskey, where neighborhood gossip flowed as freely as the tap beer, which made it perfect for what I had in mind. I'd been coming here occasionally for years, usually when Lauren was working late, which now made a lot more sense. The bartender, Tommy, knew me well enough to have my drink ready before I asked for it. Rough day? He asked, sliding a beer across the scarred wooden bar. You could say that. I took a long drink, letting the cold liquid settle my nerves. Wife troubles. Tommy nodded sympathetically. He'd heard this story from a dozen different men over the years. Want to talk about it? Found out she's been having an affair? The words felt strange coming out of my mouth, but also liberating. With her college ex? Been going on for months. Damn. Tommy shook his head. How'd you find out? I told him about the locked drawer, the photographs, the love notes. I didn't mention mailing copies to Savannah. That would come later, when the story had time to spread and grow. She's been meeting him at the Riverside Hotel, I continued. Every Thursday, room 237, writing him love letters like she's 16 years old again. By the time I finished my first beer, 3 other guys at the bar were listening. By the second beer, I was holding court for half the room, telling them about Lauren's afternoon visitor, the screaming match that woke the neighborhood, the folder full of evidence that proved my wife had been living a double life. The worst part, I said, playing to my audience now, is that she's still trying to convince me it was innocent. Says they're just friends who apparently can't keep their hands off each other. My ex-wife tried that line too, said Mike, a plumber who lived 3 streets over. Turned out she was just friends with half the neighborhood. The conversation flowed from there, each man contributing his own story of betrayal and disappointment. But they kept coming back to Lauren, to the details of her affair, to the spectacle Savannah had created on our front porch. I always thought she seemed too good to be true, said Danny, who worked construction and had done some repairs on our house last year. Real polite, but cold, you know, like she thought she was better than the rest of us. She works at that fancy tech company downtown, I added. Makes twice what I do renovating houses, always talking about her important meetings and high-level strategy sessions. Bet those strategy sessions weren't what you thought they were, Mike said, and the whole bar laughed. I nursed my 3rd beer and let the conversation continue around me. By closing time, the story of Lauren's affair had been dissected, analyzed, and embellished by a room full of men who had their own reasons for enjoying the downfall of an unfaithful wife. More importantly, it had been heard by people who would tell their wives, who would tell their friends, who would spread it through the neighborhood like wildfire. The next morning, I got confirmation that my strategy was working. Mrs. Henley was waiting by her mailbox when I went out to get the newspaper. She'd clearly been watching for me. Nick, honey, she called out, her voice dripping with false sympathy. I heard about what happened yesterday. Are you doing okay? As well as can be expected, I said, playing the role of the wounded husband. It's been a difficult time. I can imagine. She moved closer, lowering her voice conspiratorially. That woman who came to your house, she seemed very upset. Savannah Lindsay, Cameron's wife. I shook my head sadly. Yep, she'd been tracking her husband's affair for months. Had credit card receipts, hotel records, everything. Mrs. Henley's eyes lit up with the hunger of a woman who'd just been handed the gossip jackpot. How long has it been going on? Since last year, apparently. Lauren's been meeting him every Thursday at the Riverside Hotel, writing him love letters, planning their future together. I paused, letting the details sink in. The worst part is that she was using our address as a mail drop. That's how Savannah found us. Your own address? Mrs. Henley gasped. The nerve of that woman. I keep thinking about all those late nights, all those work emergencies that couldn't wait. I shrugged helplessly. I trusted her completely. Never occurred to me that she was capable of this kind of deception. By the time I finished my conversation with Mrs. Henley, I could practically see the phone calls she was already planning to make. The neighborhood gossip network would have the full story by lunchtime, but I wasn't done yet. That afternoon, I drove to Lauren's office building. I didn't go inside. That would have been too obvious. Instead, I parked across the street and waited. At 5:30, Lauren emerged with a group of her colleagues, including Jordan Walsh, an ambitious young woman who'd always seemed to resent Lauren's position in the company. They were heading toward the parking garage, deep in conversation about some project deadline. I intercepted them at the crosswalk. "Lauren," I called out, making my voice carry just enough to ensure her colleagues would hear every word. "We need to talk." She turned, her face immediately flushing with embarrassment. "Nick, what are you doing here?" "I've been thinking about what you said this morning, about starting over." I moved closer, forcing her colleagues to either walk away or stay and listen. They stayed. "I think you're right. We should both start over, separately." "Please," she whispered. "Not here." "Where then? The Riverside Hotel? Room 237? Or would that bring back too many memories of your Thursday meetings with Cameron?" Jordan's eyebrows shot up. The other colleagues exchanged glances. "I'll call you tonight," Lauren said quickly, grabbing my arm and trying to pull me away from her audience. "Don't bother," I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Savannah Lindsay already told me everything I need to know about your relationship with her husband. Amazing how much evidence an angry wife can gather when she puts her mind to it." I turned and walked away, leaving Lauren standing on the sidewalk with her colleagues, her professional reputation crumbling as efficiently as her marriage had. The campaign was working perfectly. But I was just getting started. Lauren didn't come home that night. I wasn't surprised. After the scene outside her office building, she probably needed time to figure out how to explain away another public humiliation. Or maybe she'd run straight to Cameron, looking for comfort from the man who'd helped destroy her marriage. Either way, her absence gave me time to plan the next phase of my campaign. I started by calling in sick to work, the first time I'd used a sick day in 3 years. Then I drove to the Riverside Hotel, a mid-range place on the edge of downtown that catered to business travelers and people who needed privacy for activities they couldn't conduct at home. The desk clerk was a college kid who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. "I'm trying to reach my wife," I told him, putting on my most concerned husband act. "Lauren Harrow. She's been meeting with a business associate here, Cameron Lindsay. I think they usually use room 237. The kid's expression immediately became guarded. "I can't give out information about our guest, sir." "I understand," I said, pulling out my phone. "It's just that there's been a family emergency, and I need to reach her urgently. Maybe you could just confirm if she's checked in today?" "I really can't." "Look," I interrupted, showing him a photo of Lauren from my phone. "This is my wife. We've been married 15 years. Her mother is in the hospital, and I can't reach her on her cell phone. I just need to know if she's here so I can get her this message." The kid wavered, clearly torn between hotel policy and basic human compassion. "Please," I added. "It's her mother." He glanced around to make sure his manager wasn't watching, then quickly checked his computer screen. "Room 237 is registered to a Cameron Lindsay," he said quietly. "But I don't see anyone else listed on the registration." "That's okay. If they're there, could you call the room? Tell them Nick Harrow needs to speak with Lauren about a family emergency?" The kid nodded and picked up the phone. I watched his face as he waited for someone to answer. "Mr. Lindsay, this is the front desk. I have a Nick Harrow here asking to speak with Lauren about a family emergency." "Oh, okay. Yes, sir. I'll tell him." He hung up and looked at me apologetically. "Mr. Lindsay says there's no Lauren in his room, and he doesn't know anyone by that name." "Interesting," I said. "Could you try again? Maybe tell him it's about his wife, Savannah?" The kid's eyes widened. "Sir, I think maybe you should—" "Just one more call," I said. "Please." Reluctantly, he dialed again. This time, the conversation was shorter. "He hung up," the kid said, "and he asked me to call security if you don't leave immediately." I smiled and pulled out a $20 bill. "Thanks for trying. You've been very helpful." The kid pocketed the money, looking relieved that I was leaving without causing a scene. But I wasn't done with the Riverside Hotel yet. I spent the next hour in the lobby, pretending to read a magazine while watching the elevator bank. At 6:30, Lauren emerged from the elevator, followed 30 seconds later by Cameron Lindsay. They'd clearly coordinated their exit to avoid being seen together, but they hadn't counted on Lauren's husband conducting surveillance from behind a copy of Time magazine. I followed Lauren to the parking garage, staying far enough back to avoid detection. She was walking quickly, her phone pressed to her ear, clearly agitated about something. Probably the front desk calls that had spooked Cameron. When she reached her car, I stepped out of the shadows. "Lauren." She spun around, nearly dropping her phone. "And Nick, what are you doing here?" Visiting the scene of the crime, I said conversationally. Nice hotel. I can see why you and Cameron chose it for your Thursday meetings. Very discreet. Her face went through several expressions before settling on defiant anger. You followed me here. I didn't have to follow you. I already knew where you'd be. I leaned against her car, blocking her access to the driver's door. Room 237, right? Same room every week? Cameron's very consistent in his adultery. This is harassment, Nick. I could call the police. And tell them what? That your husband caught you leaving a hotel room with another woman's husband? I'm sure they'd be very sympathetic. She tried to push past me to reach her car door, but I didn't move. We need to talk, she said. But not here. Why not here? This seems like the perfect place to discuss your relationship with Cameron. After all, it's where you've been conducting most of it. Fine. She crossed her arms and glared at me. What do you want, Nick? I want you to stop lying to me. I want you to stop pretending this is some innocent friendship that got out of hand. I want you to admit what you've been doing and take responsibility for it. Okay. Her voice was flat, emotionless. I've been having an affair with Cameron for 8 months. We meet here every Thursday. I'm in love with him, and he's in love with me. Is that what you wanted to hear? The words should have hurt more than they did. Instead, I felt a strange sense of relief. Finally, the truth. What about Savannah? I asked. Lauren's expression flickered. What about her? Cameron's wife, the woman who showed up at our house yesterday with a folder full of evidence. What about her? Cameron's marriage has been over for years, Lauren said, but she wouldn't meet my eyes. Savannah is cold, controlling. She doesn't understand him the way I do. Is that what he told you? It's the truth. Really? Because when I called room 237 an hour ago and mentioned Savannah's name, Cameron hung up pretty quickly. Doesn't sound like a man who's ready to leave his wife for you. Lauren's face went pale. You called the room? I also talked to Savannah yesterday, after she left our house. Interesting conversation. She had a lot to say about Cameron's version of events. What did she tell you? I smiled, enjoying the fear in Lauren's eyes. She told me that Cameron claims you've been stalking him, that you won't accept that their brief affair is over, that you've been threatening to destroy his marriage if he doesn't leave his wife for you. That's not true. She also told me that Cameron has been showing her your love letters, laughing about how pathetic and desperate you are, how you throw yourself at him every week, begging him to choose you over his wife. Lauren's mouth opened and closed silently. One more thing, I continued. Savannah isn't planning to divorce Cameron. She's planning to use your affair to destroy your career and your reputation. She's already contacted your boss. That last part was a lie, but Lauren didn't know that. Her face crumpled as the implications hit her. You're lying, she whispered. Am I? Why don't you call Cameron and ask him? I'm sure he'll be honest with you about his plans for your future together. I stepped away from her car door. Drive safe, Lauren. Wouldn't want you to have an accident while you're thinking about how Cameron really feels about you. I walked away, leaving her standing in the parking garage with her phone in her hand and her world falling apart around her. The campaign was accelerating perfectly, but the best was yet to come. Lauren came home at midnight, her eyes red from crying and her hands shaking as she poured herself a glass of wine. I was waiting in the living room, reading a book like this was any other evening. You're still awake, she said, not quite looking at me. Couldn't sleep. Too much excitement today. I marked my page and set the book aside. How was your evening with Cameron? She flinched at his name. We need to talk. I'm listening. She sat down across from me, clutching her wine glass like a lifeline. I called him after you left the hotel, asked him about what you said. And? He denied everything at first, said you were making it up to hurt me. She took a shaky sip of wine. But when I pressed him about Savannah, about what she really knew, he told you the truth? He told me that Savannah has known about us for months, that she's been collecting evidence, planning to use it against me. Lauren's voice broke. He said she threatened to destroy my career if he didn't end things with me. So he chose his wife. He chose himself. The bitterness in her voice was sharp enough to cut. He said our relationship was getting too complicated, too risky, that he couldn't afford to lose his marriage and his job over what he called a temporary distraction. A temporary distraction. I let the words hang in the air. Is that what you were to him? She started crying again, ugly sobs that shook her whole body. 8 months, Nick. 8 months of telling me he loved me, that he was going to leave Savannah, that we were going to build a life together, and I was just a distraction. I should have felt sorry for her. Part of me wanted to, but the larger part of me was too busy cataloging every detail of her humiliation for future use. What happens now? I asked. I don't know. She wiped her nose with the back of her hand. Cameron won't return my calls. Savannah is planning to destroy my reputation, and you? She looked at me with something that might have been hope. What are you planning to do? I'm planning to make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of person you are. Her face went white. What do you mean? I mean that your affair with Cameron Lindsay is going to become public knowledge. Your colleagues already suspect something after that scene outside your office. The neighbors are already talking about Savannah's visit yesterday. It won't take much to connect the dots. Nick, please. Please what? Please protect the woman who betrayed our marriage for 8 months. Please help you cover up your affair so you can find another married man to pursue. Please don't destroy my life over this. I leaned forward, studying her tear-stained face. Lauren, you destroyed your own life the moment you decided Cameron Lindsay was more important than our marriage. I'm just making sure everyone else knows about it. She set down her wine glass and tried to compose herself. What if I fight back? What if I tell people that you've been emotionally abusive, that you drove me to have an affair? With what evidence? I asked calmly. You're the one with love letters in your handwriting. You're the one with hotel receipts and credit card statements. You're the one whose lover's wife showed up at our house with a folder full of proof. I could make something up. You could try, but who's going to believe the woman who's been lying to everyone for 8 months? Who's going to take your word over the evidence Savannah has already collected? She stared at me for a long moment, and I could see her calculating her options. Finally, she slumped back in her chair. What do you want from me? She asked. I want you to understand what you've lost. I want you to feel what I felt when I found those love letters in your drawer. I want you to experience the humiliation of having your private life exposed to everyone you know. And then? And then you can start over, just like you wanted, somewhere else with someone who doesn't know about your affair with Cameron Lindsay. Her eyes widened as the implication hit her. You want me to leave town? I want you to leave my life. How far you go is up to you. She was quiet for several minutes, processing the reality of her situation. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. I never meant for it to happen this way. But it did happen this way, and now you have to live with the consequences. She finished her wine and stood up unsteadily. I'm going to bed. Lauren, I called after her. She turned back, hope flickering in her eyes. Don't bother locking your drawer anymore. I already have copies of everything. The hope died, and she walked upstairs without another word. I sat in the living room for another hour, planning the final phase of my campaign. Tomorrow was Friday, which meant Lauren would have to face her colleagues after yesterday's scene outside the office building. It also meant the weekend was coming, giving the neighborhood gossip network 2 full days to dissect and spread the story of her affair. But I wanted to make sure the story spread exactly the way I wanted it to, which meant one more visit to the Rusted Nail and one more conversation with the right audience. By the time I finished with Lauren's reputation, starting over somewhere else wouldn't just be her best option, it would be her only option. The campaign was almost complete. Just one more push, and Lauren would understand exactly what she'd thrown away when she chose Cameron Lindsay over our marriage, and everyone else would understand it too. Friday evening at the Rusted Nail was busier than usual. Word had gotten around about Lauren's affair, and half the neighborhood seemed to have shown up to hear the latest developments. I held court at my usual spot at the bar, nursing a beer and playing the role of the wounded husband one last time. She finally admitted it last night, I told the assembled crowd. 8 months of meetings at the Riverside Hotel, 8 months of love letters and lies, 8 months of making a fool out of me while she planned her future with another woman's husband. What are you going to do? Asked Mike, the plumber who'd become my most reliable audience. What can I do? File for divorce and try to rebuild my life. I shrugged helplessly. The worst part is that she actually thought Cameron was going to leave his wife for her. Even after Savannah showed up with all that evidence, Lauren still believed he loved her. Some women never learn, said Danny from his corner booth. My ex was the same way, always chasing after men who were just using her. The really sad part, I continued, is that Lauren's still trying to contact him. Even after he told her it was over, she keeps calling and texting. His wife is furious about it. That last part was pure fiction, but it served my purpose. By the time the evening was over, the story of Lauren's desperate pursuit of a man who'd rejected her would be all over the neighborhood. But the real finale was still to come. Saturday morning, I drove to the grocery store where Lauren did our weekly shopping. I knew she'd be there. She was obsessively punctual about her routines, even when her life was falling apart. I found her in the produce section, examining apples with the kind of intense concentration people use when they're trying to avoid thinking about their problems. Lauren, I said, approaching her cart. She looked up, her face immediately tensing. What do you want, Nick? To give you this. I handed her an envelope. Divorce papers. I had them drawn up yesterday. She stared at the envelope like it might bite her. Here? You're serving me divorce papers in the grocery store? I figured it was appropriate. Public, witnesses, lots of people to see how this story ends. I gestured around us at the other shoppers, several of whom were already watching our conversation with interest. You're enjoying this, she said, her voice rising. You're actually enjoying destroying my life. I'm not destroying your life, Lauren. I'm just making sure everyone knows what you did to our marriage. What I did? She laughed bitterly. What about what you did? What about 15 years of taking me for granted, of treating me like a piece of furniture, of never once asking what I needed or wanted? What I did was trust you. What I did was work 60-hour weeks to pay for this house, your car, your clothes, your lifestyle. What I did was believe you when you said you were working late. Several shoppers had stopped pretending to shop and were openly listening now. Lauren noticed and lowered her voice. Please, she whispered. Not here. We can discuss this at home. There's nothing to discuss. You made your choice when you started meeting Cameron at that hotel? You made your choice when you wrote him love letters describing how much you loved him? You made your choice when you decided our marriage meant less to you than an affair with a man who was just using you for entertainment? He wasn't using me, she said, but her voice lacked conviction. Really? Then why won't he return your calls? Why did he choose his wife over you? Why did he tell Savannah that you were just a temporary distraction? Her face crumpled, and she started crying right there in the produce section, surrounded by strangers who were getting a front row seat to the final destruction of her dignity. You want to know what Cameron told his wife about you? I continued, raising my voice just enough to ensure our audience could hear every word. He told her you were desperate, pathetic, that you threw yourself at him every week, begging him to choose you over his family. Stop, she whispered. He showed her your love letters and laughed about how needy you were, how you actually believed he was going to leave his wife for someone like you. Stop it. He called you a midlife crisis, a mistake, a woman so starved for attention that you'd destroy your own marriage for a few hours in a hotel room with a man who never had any intention of choosing you. She was sobbing now, her whole body shaking with the force of her humiliation. The other shoppers were staring openly, some recording with their phones, others whispering to each other about the drama unfolding in front of them. Sign the papers, Lauren, I said quietly. Take whatever dignity you have left and start over somewhere else. Because this is what your life looks like now. Public humiliation, social isolation, and the knowledge that you threw away 15 years of marriage for a man who never loved you. She grabbed the envelope with shaking hands and stumbled away, abandoning her cart and fleeing toward the exit while our audience watched her retreat. I finished my own shopping methodically, nodding politely to the other customers who approached me with expressions of sympathy and curiosity. By the time I got home, the story of Lauren's grocery store breakdown would be spreading through every social media group and neighborhood chat in a 5-mile radius. Lauren's car wasn't in the driveway when I got home. Her suitcases were gone from the bedroom, along with most of her clothes and personal items. She'd left the signed divorce papers on the kitchen table, along with a note that simply said, "You win." But it wasn't about winning. It was about making sure that everyone, Lauren, Cameron, Savannah, the neighbors, her colleagues, understood exactly what happened when someone decided to betray the trust of a person who'd spent 15 years loving them. I sat at the kitchen table where we'd shared 10,000 meals, looking at Lauren's signature on the divorce papers, and felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Peace. The campaign was over. Lauren was gone. Our marriage was officially finished, and everyone who mattered knew exactly why. I poured myself a drink and raised it in a toast to the empty house. To starting over, I said aloud. The right way this time. Outside, Mrs. Henley was working in her garden again, probably hoping for one more glimpse of the drama that had been unfolding next door. But the show was over now. Lauren had made her choice, faced the consequences, and disappeared to start the new life she'd wanted so badly. As for me, I had a house to myself, a reputation as the wronged husband who'd handled his wife's betrayal with dignity, and the satisfaction of knowing that Lauren would never again be able to pretend she was the victim in this story. The drawer's secret had been revealed, and justice had been served exactly as it should be, publicly, completely, and without mercy.